Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kick Brand Burnout to the Curb, how to create a values-driven brand. I'm super excited you're here. I'm Anna Byerly, the owner of Creative. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and about my company. But first of all, again, like I said, I'm so excited you're here. And today we're going to be talking about how to eliminate burnout from your business by building a values-driven brand. This is something that I personally have experienced in my years of business. I think that as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we are so passionate about what we do. And because we have all of that passion, sometimes we really do put it all into our business. And while that can be really great and to show the world how passionate we are about what we do, it can also result in working long hours, spending a ton of energy on our business, which results in that feeling of just feeling burnt out and over it. It can come up in a lot of different ways, but it's something that I want to help business owners eliminate because I think it's something that we are predisposed to. But by setting some boundaries, by building our brand in a smart, intelligent way that is aligned with what we really, really believe in, we can eliminate that from happening. And if you are already feeling in that burned out place, first of all, know that it is completely normal. I am with you. I've been there. And we can start to take apart and realize where in your brand this is happening so that we can prevent it from happening in the future. So to say up top, this is going to be about 25-30 minutes of time, and I would encourage you to go ahead and grab a piece of paper, your journal, open a document on your computer so you can take some notes and go through a few exercises. This will be interactive. There'll be a handful of exercises for you to go through while we are doing this. So go ahead and do that. You can also pause throughout if you want some additional time on things. If I'm doing this workshop live, usually I leave some time for you to go through these exercises, but in this, I'm just going to let you pause and take as much time as you need. So first of all, to tell you a little bit about myself, there's me. I run an organization called Antivirally-Creative. We are an education-focused branding agency, and we work with purpose-driven leaders and founders. And we really focus on values-focused branding that works for them and guides their marketing efforts. It's always my goal to help organizations create brands that are sustainable, that will grow with them. Branding is not a once-and-done thing, and so we want to set you up for success so that you continue to grow after we are done working with you. And we also have ways to continue working with you on coaching and different sort of offers where we can continue to help you grow after you've laid that original foundation. We often work with business owners who are solopreneurs. They work solo, and they are starting to realize that they want to up level, they want to pivot, they want to shift, they want to do something new. So that is mostly who we work with. We do one-on-one branding services, mostly strategy related things, really laying down a foundation for your brand and creating a personality on top of that through different marketing strategy, content strategy, messaging. We also do workshops like this one. We have a lot of resources on our website, both free and for a low cost, working on some other programs and some coaching too. So in today's workshop, we're going to first establish who exactly a values-based brand is for, talk about how to craft a brand based on your values that creates more sustainability, and it also lowers that risk of burnout. So like I was saying, branding is not a one and done thing. This is really your foundation that you're going to be building your business on. And so we want to make sure that that foundation is strong and stable before you really jump into everything and start to build your business. Just like a house, you want to make sure that it has a strong foundation so that nothing wavers as you start to build things on top of it. We want to do that up front. Also going to go through a workshop, in this workshop, we're going to go through an exercise to help you find your own brand values and also brainstorm those values and review how exactly to build your brand on them. Hopefully, we will also be setting you up for success in creating other brand elements, starting to build that brand personality on top of your brand foundation. So, first of all, we are going to really establish what exactly a brand is. There's lots of definitions out there. There's lots of different ways people interpret brands. And so we're going to start with a definition that we use here. So a brand is the visible part of your organization. It's what your audience recognizes. That recognition is also often seen through visuals, words, and overall tone. I like here to use kind of a big international example. So if you think of Nike, that's a really well-known athletic brand. First of all, you recognize them through their visuals. You see their logo, you know that Nike usually uses like black, white, very bright orange imagery. Whenever you see that, when you are in a circumstance where maybe you're looking at shoes, looking at athletic wear, if you see that bright orange, you're automatically going to think Nike, even if that is a subconscious thing for you. Even if you're not specifically thinking the brand name, you're connecting other parts of who they are to that color. So that is a huge part of brand recognition. Also words and overall tone. So continuing on this example, Nike has this very famous tagline of "just do it." And even that quick, simple little phrase, there's a lot behind that. It's showing that this is a bold brand. They're really kind of in your face a little bit and very obvious about what they believe in. They are very to the point. They are a little bit pushing the edge a bit. In that, I would say kind of their values are being really bold. They're a little bit innovative, pushing the envelope, things like that. And their overall tone is the same. If you ever see a Nike television ad or a print ad, read their social media, it's usually very intense. It's a little bit divisive at times. They are not afraid to get political, and they are really kind of, again, pushing the envelope a little bit. And so that's what their audience recognizes. When I would ask somebody, you know, tell me about what Nike stands for, you're kind of able to start to gather these things. Again, even if it is something you've only been thinking about subconsciously, when you start to think about this consciously and think about brands and what they stand for, there's probably a lot more that you've observed than you might initially recognize. So your brand really is your business's personality. So when you think about a personality of an individual, yourself, a close friend or family member, that is how you describe that person. You might say, oh, you know, my cousin is really funny, or, you know, my brother is a very serious person. You know, my really good friend is very, you know, an innovative person. That person's really funny. That person is really bold. That person is very traditional. We use these different words to describe people and describe their personality, and it's very similar to a brand. So starting to think about your own brand, the business that you have, how is somebody recognizing you? What are some of those words that they would use to really describe who you are? What are those branding elements that are most recognizable? Is it your visuals? Is it your words? Is it through your tone? And what are those things describing? And if someone looked at something of your brands, it didn't have your logo or your brand name on it, how would they describe you? If they didn't know it was you, how would they really describe that organization of those things? So if you want to take a few seconds here to go ahead and pause this and start to write down some of those words, go for it. So moving on, what exactly is a values-driven brand? So quite literally, it is a brand that is centered around core values. Core values are those fundamental beliefs of your organization, and they drive why you do what you do. So again, going back to that example of the personality factor, you might be, you know, a very bold person, or you might be a very traditional person, and those say something about your values, or they might directly be your values. If you're someone who is a little more traditional, you know, isn't really pushing the edge, is somebody who wants to do things more in a classical way, more of a, you know, time-tested way, there's core values that are driving that, you know, safety, tradition, for example. Those could be some values that are driving you. So really they are driving what you do, and they're those fundamental beliefs of what your organization is based around. So just like a person has those personal values, your organization at its core, whether you consciously realize it or not, has those ideas that are really driving it as well. So speaking of this, for personal brands, if you are a brand that is driven by an individual, for example, my brand is antivirallycreative, it is really driven by my own personal interests and my own personal values. I'm more of a personal brand, a lot of creatives, some shop owners, some consultants, things like that. You might also be driven by your personal values. For other brands, usually larger brands, these values could be driven by an organization as a whole. So like, for example, Nike, it's very possible the owner was a bold, innovative person, but really the organization decided as a whole, these are the values that everyone has to hold. Even if it's not something that personally drives them, it has to be something that they believe in order for this to work. So that's a little bit about what a values-driven brand is. So why would you create a values-driven brand? First of all, building a brand on values ensures your brand is built on something that doesn't change. For a personal brand, if you think about what your personal values are, even if you've never sat down and kind of thought through those before, if you think about the type of person you are and what some of the things are that are driving you, they're likely something that's been driving you your entire life, or at least for a long time. And it's something that isn't really changing. It's a pretty static thing. It is something that is a through line throughout the majority of your life. And it's the same with a business. Whatever you are founding your business on, whatever that idea is, whatever it is that you do really well, is also very likely not to change. It's possible that some of your values might shift a little bit. One might have more importance over the other at different points in time in your business, but the entire idea is not changing as a whole. Whereas other parts of your brand, which we very much view as foundational and don't necessarily, change very often, such as your audience, what your mission is, what is the services or products that you're offering, those don't change very often, but they still change more often than values. Your audience might shift a little bit, especially as you grow. Your mission is going to shift with that. And your services and your products might change a little bit as well as you personally grow in what you are able to do and what your strengths are. So values really get to anchor your brand decision making. They're influencing your audience and who you want to work with. So even if your audience does shift in terms of demographics as you continue to grow, your audience is still going to be someone who's connected directly to your values, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Your values also help to establish the types of services and products that you're offering. And they also guide your marketing and your content decisions. Your values are rooted in all of these things. And so it is quite obvious that we should be building a foundational element of your brand on these so that from the bottom up, you are able to really influence that. And here is that visual of the bottom up. So what does a values-based brand look like? So I call this like the brand pyramid. So we start from the bottom and move up. The things towards the bottom of this pyramid are the things that don't change quite as often, and the top is what does change more often. So starting with your values and then your audience, this is really the base of the pyramid. Your values are those things that drive you. It's what you do really, really well, and those things don't change. And so if you are putting your values first, you're going to attract an audience that is also attracted to those values. Whether they personally share those values or they are someone who is looking up to those values, it's something that they're striving for. They're going to be connected directly to your values. It doesn't matter what you're selling, what the product is that you're selling, what types of services that you're offering. If they are connected to your values, they're interested in your company. They want to learn more. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, when they're first starting out, they are focusing on their services or their products first and building everything on top of that. But especially if you're a solo business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, you likely are going to keep growing. You're going to keep growing in your skill set. So you're going to get to a time where you are going to want to shift your services. And if you've built everything on top of those services, everything else is going to have to shift too. So like if you're a wedding photographer, for example, if you build everything on being a photographer, then when you're no longer offering photography, if you're shifting into, maybe educating other wedding photographers or, managing something else with weddings, you're going to have to kind of go back and start over from square one. Whereas if you had built things on your values in the first place, let's say you're really customer service oriented and you're very community oriented, you're really serving this one community. If you shift your services after you've already created those values, you have an audience that is built in, they're really looking for those values as well. Even if you're shifting your services, your audience isn't necessarily going to change because they're already bought into what you do, they're bought into how you do it, and they want to keep supporting you. So going back to this, if your services are built onto those values, that's what's going to happen. And your mission is really a culmination of your values, your audience, and your services. So that is where your mission comes in. Those elements on those first four elements on those first two layers are what I like to call a brand foundation. That's kind of what everything else here is built on, and that's what's going to tell you who you are and what you do. On top of that, we build your tone and your voice, which is influenced directly by this. It's influenced by what your values are and how we can work that in to the tone of voice and what you are saying. And it's also going to be speaking to your audience and speaking about your services. Your visual brand is built on top of that, which again is directly aligned, directly influenced by everything else here. And lastly, we're talking about your content and your marketing strategy. This is something that is going to change more often, but again, should be always aligned with this. So what exactly does a values-based brand look like? So values are the foundation of your brand. Like I mentioned, if your values are unchanging, the rest of your brand is going to be aligned and consistent. If you do this first, I promise everything else is just going to fall into place, and you're going to have something to come back and gut check all of your decisions. If you're building your services, if you are building your marketing plan, if you're building your visual identity, you're able to go back to your values and say, does everything align with this? And if not, what do I need to change? Like I mentioned before, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners build their brand on their services, and I'm really here to flip that script. By building the brand on values, you have the freedom to start to tweak your audience, mission, and services as your organization grows. It really helps things be so much more sustainable and so much more aligned with what you want to do, because again, these values aren't going to change. It is something that is with you for life. And so as long as you're making those decisions in line with your values, you're going to be able to grow. Your business is going to allow you to grow. That building things on services just doesn't really allow you to do. So we are going to get into the workshop-y portion of this workshop. So how do I find my core values? We're going to go through a couple exercises here that's going to give you those beginning steps to finding those core values. But I do want to encourage you to take some time to workshop them and ensure they feel right. You'll be able to pause and take as much time as you want on this, but I really encourage you to keep that list that you come up with and revisit it. Don't necessarily think you're going to walk away from this video with your core values baked in and ready to go. I would encourage you to write them down, look at them every day, take some time, make sure they feel right. Look up certain words in a thesaurus if you feel like, okay, this is close, this is the idea of what I want, but this isn't it. So really take some time. Also feel free to look up lists of core values online so that you know exactly what you're looking for and you have a good structure for this. I also want to mention that sometimes core values are simply a word like boldness or innovation, or it could be something like, we bring innovation to every client conversation, some sort of short sentence that you can always describe a little bit more in a paragraph below. So you are going to be building the rest of your brand on top of these core values. So again, just as a reminder, take some time, workshop them, make sure they feel right. If you're a personal brand, these values are likely going to overlap with your personal life and values. So if you've ever done a personal branding sort of value finding in that, you can feel free to pull that out, start to build on top of it. Also, most organizations have about 5 to 10 core values. I would really encourage you to focus on quality over quantity here. If you come up with 3 or 4 and you feel like you don't really have anything else to add, I think that's enough. I have about 8 personally, but I think, more than that is usually reserved for larger organizations. And so know that you don't have to go overboard, but also if you have a lot, it's totally okay too. So grab your notebook, grab your piece of paper, your Word doc, whatever you have open, and take some time here to pause this video and just write down everything you do well as a brand. Not focusing on technical skills or specific products or services, starting to think about some of those ways that people describe you. If this is tough for you, maybe go through some testimonials, think about what your clients or your customers really compliment you on. Also think about what your motivation is and what you're really helping others with. So some examples of this could be like really good customer service, really good at speed of getting back to people, we're really efficient, anything like that. So take a few moments here to pause the video and just start to write down A, what you do really, really well, and B, what kind of your motivation is, what those driving factors feel like for you in your business. All right, so now that you've taken a little bit of time to do that, we're going to keep workshopping those values. So taking a look over that list that you've created, start to, underline, highlight anything that is sticking out to you, anything that's really resonating with your gut, with your mind, whatever is working for you here. So like highlighting, okay, we're really customer service oriented. Okay, we're really innovative. We come up with solutions that other people don't. Whatever it is, it's really feeling good for you here. And on the next slide, I am going to have a long list of core values, some specific core values. So take some time here, choose about 5 more if that feels good to you, that resonate with you, that share some of the things that you are seeing in that list. Also, if there's anything in that list that you're like, oh, that word is really sticking out to me, you can go ahead and grab that for this too. But this is just a list of some specific core values. So pause here, check these out, and write down anything that is really resonating with you. So once you've done that, I want to recommend to you to really use this as a starting point and keep workshopping those values. Values should really communicate why someone wants to work with you over someone else. And they should cross over with what values your audience either has or is looking for. So the audience building portion comes after you've really solidified your values. But if you already have a good idea of who your audience is, you can start to think about what it is that they're looking for. They're looking for a more traditional approach to this specific thing, or they're looking for a more bold approach to this thing that I provide. And they should, again, really communicate why they want to work with you over someone else. So thinking about an organization that's doing the same services or offering the same products, why is somebody coming to you versus going to that other organization? What is different about you? And so from here, you're really going to create that foundation that you're going to build up from there. So coming back to this brand pyramid here, so in terms of next steps and what you are working on, after you really establish those values and feel really good about them, you can move on to identifying your audience. So who specifically is really lighting you up? Who do you want to help? Who shares those values? And how can you describe who that person is, both in terms of the demographics, their age, their location, what their income is, kind of those numbers-based things, and also their psychographics, their driving factors. So they share some of those driving factors for you. Are they looking for innovation, or is innovation something they're looking up to, for example? From there, really establishing your services and products, really making sure that your services and products are something that your audience is looking for. And also making sure that it aligns with your values. If you're creating a new service, but you're like, ooh, this isn't necessarily aligning with some of these values, it's not very visionary, it's not very bold, whatever it may be, going back and really rethinking that and, gut checking, heart checking, mind checking, making sure that everything is really resonating with you. And then from there, summing all of that up in a succinct mission statement that sums up your values, your audience, your mission, and encourages your audience to learn more. So we'll go back to like that, the wedding photographer example. So if somebody is this should say sum up your values, audience, and services. So say somebody's a wedding photographer. So they're offering wedding photography. They have a very bold and innovative approach, and they want to work with young, couples who are eloping. So, you can say like, we are an elopement wedding photographer working with bold, innovative couples. So that is going to speak directly to who that audience is. It quickly says what they're offering in terms of services, and it also says how they do it. So if somebody, is doing an elopement and they are a couple, but they don't necessarily want a bold approach, they want to do something more classical, you're immediately going to know that's not for you. And then the people that it is for, it's going to speak directly to them, so that you're already getting those leads and those people who are coming to you, and they already know exactly what it is that you do. And so you really just have to, close that sale in terms of providing them with the basic information. So from there, that really builds that brand foundation, and then that can align your tone of voice, your visual brand, and your marketing and content on top of that very easily. So that is it. Thank you guys so much for being here. In terms of next steps, I also will include a little brand guideline template too. So you can, as you start to flesh out all this information, include everything in one place so that as you start to grow, you are able to pass along those brand guidelines to others. You are able to onboard new team members. You're able to keep everything in one place so that you're able to really remind yourself what your foundation is all about and what your brand personality is. Thank you all so much.